Tell me the truth. Is this baby mine?" The room was quiet, except for the shallow rhythm of her breath and the faint hum of machines nearby. She should have been focused on the next contraction, on the pain clawing through her body, on the miracle seconds away from arriving. But instead, she froze. His voice didn't rise. He didn't shout. He asked her with a softness that hurt more than anger ever could. She turned to him, stunned. Elric, who had held her hand through every ache, kissed her shoulder during every moment of doubt, braided her daughter's hair, built their home brick by brick, both real and emotional, was now looking at her with eyes she'd never seen before. Not angry, wounded, and she knew that kind of pain. She had lived with it. She had slept beside it. But this time, she was the one who had caused it. What do you say when the man who gave you back your life suddenly questions the very foundation you built together? What do you do when love isn't the question anymore? Truth is, they say love is about trust, but nobody talks about what happens when trust walks out of the room and you're left holding silence instead. He leaned closer, not to accuse her, not to shame her, only to know. Before this baby comes into the world, I need to know what kind of world we're bringing them into. Please, Adelise, tell me. She couldn't speak. Her lips trembled. Her fingers clenched the blanket. Her heart screamed, but her mouth wouldn't open. How do you respond when the person who saved you from your past suddenly feels like part of it? If you've ever faced a moment where truth was scarier than pain, hit that like button. This story isn't easy, but I promise every second is worth it. Stay with me. Adelise had rehearsed this day in her mind, not the part where she screamed through contractions or clenched the cold bedrail until her knuckles turned white, not the sterile smell or the nurse's calm instructions echoing in the background. No, she had rehearsed the moment she'd finally give Elric the life he deserved, the family they both longed for. She imagined his voice cracking as he held their newborn for the first time. She imagined happy tears and whispered prayers of gratitude. She imagined peace, but not this, not that question, not the way it landed like glass shattering inside her chest. Because Elric wasn't the kind of man who spoke without thinking. He held his words like promises, and when he broke his silence, it meant he'd been carrying the weight too long. "I've never needed a test," he said quietly. "But I do need the truth." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a doubt in her as a woman. It was the ache of someone who had loved her beyond measure and feared she hadn't let him all the way in. And the truth? She hadn't. Not fully. Not when it counted. She hadn't told him that nearly a year before the past had come knocking. That Aaron had stood at her door with tired eyes and unfinished apologies. That there'd been a night, a moment, where the memories blurred and her loyalty flickered, not with action, but with hesitation. And now, with the pressure building in her belly and the room tightening around her, everything inside her wanted to say, "Of course this baby is yours. What kind of question is that?" But she couldn't lie. Not now, because even if the baby was Elric's, her silence wasn't innocent anymore. It was a wall she'd built, brick by quiet brick, while smiling at him across dinner tables and holding his hand during ultrasounds. What would you do if one honest answer might cost you everything? But silence already had. Stay close. This story isn't just about love. It's about the moment when love asks you to tell the truth, even if it hurts. Adelise could feel the world narrowing. The pain in her body was real, sharp, rhythmic, pulling her under. But it wasn't the kind of pain that made her cry out. That came from him. From Elric's eyes still locked on hers, from the quiet strain in his grip, from the unbearable pause between question and answer. She looked down at her stomach, at the child who was seconds away from being born. A child conceived in love, but shadowed in doubt. She wanted to scream, "Please, don't ask me that right now." But she knew this wasn't a moment he had chosen. It was a moment she had made inevitable, because secrets are like cracks beneath the surface. They don't always break everything at once. Sometimes they wait, silent, until the pressure is too much. And now they were breaking. "I don't know," she whispered, lips barely moving. "I want it to be yours, but I don't know." She saw the flicker in his face. Not anger, loss. The kind that takes something invisible but sacred. The kind that doesn't scream. It just walks away, quietly, without slamming doors. The nurse entered before either of them could say another word. Instructions came fast now. Push. Breathe. Hold. Don't stop. Adelise did what she had to do. She brought life into the world while another part of her, the part that had been safe with him, felt like it was slipping away. Elric held the child first, cradled it close, eyes glassy, voice low. No matter what, I'll love this baby, but we can't build a future on silence. He placed the newborn in her arms, and for a moment, she thought he might leave. But he stayed. Not out of obligation, out of conflict. And that's when she knew. This wasn't just about who the father was. It was about everything she hadn't said, everything she had buried, everything she was about to finally face. This isn't just a story about a question. It's about the years that led up to it, the heartbreak that came before, the love that was tested. Come with me to the beginning, when she was still just a girl in a denim jacket, believing love was enough to save her. Before the world knew her as anyone worth remembering, Adelise Moreau was just a girl, with calloused fingers, thrift store boots, and a heart far too open for its own good. She was 19, and in love. The kind of love that made your chest flutter at the sound of a guitar string. The kind that smelled like summer grass and vanilla chapstick. The kind that didn't ask for permission. It simply happened. His name was Aaron Vale. He wasn't famous, not yet, but he sang like he knew every ache she'd never spoken out loud. He'd sit on the crumbling wooden porch of her aunt's house after closing time at the diner, guitar resting on his knee, strumming low and slow under the bruised light of evening. Sometimes he didn't even sing. Sometimes he just looked at her, like he saw all the things she was afraid to believe about herself. "You always look like you're running," he said once, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Even when you're sitting still." Adelise had smiled, caught off guard. "Maybe I am." He leaned closer. "Then stay, just for tonight. Let the world wait." And she did. That night, she forgot about bills, about her parents arguing in distant towns, about all the ways she'd taught herself not to need anything. She let herself need him. The months that followed were drenched in color. Long drives with no destinations. Cheap motel nights filled with music and plans scrawled in notebooks. Shared secrets whispered into collarbones. Afternoons where they slow danced barefoot on hardwood floors. He called her sunlight in a storm. She called him her, almost always. Aaron would joke about their future like it was a promise already written. "One day, I'll write a song about you, the kind they play at weddings. Only if I'm the one in the white dress. No one else could be." Adelise believed him, with her whole foolish beating heart. And when she missed her period, she didn't panic. Not right away. She sat on the edge of her bed, pregnancy test in hand, and whispered, "Please, let this be good. Let this be ours." It was positive. And she cried, not from fear, but from something bigger, something tender. That night, she told Aaron, expecting confusion, maybe nerves, but also joy. He stared at the test, rubbed the back of his neck, sat down slow. "We're so young, Del." She swallowed. "I know, but we'll figure it out. You and me, right?" A long silence. Then he nodded, kissed her hand, and whispered, "You and me." They planned a quiet wedding, a simple civil ceremony. No fanfare, just love. She wore a soft cream dress she bought secondhand and altered by hand. He picked out a tie the same color as her eyes. They laughed about the vows they were going to write the night before. "Don't cry," he told her, brushing her cheek. "You'll make my knees shake." "You better cry," she shot back. "I want my daughter to see how love is supposed to look." "Our daughter," he corrected, gently resting a hand on her belly. "Ours." But the morning of the ceremony, he didn't show. Not a call, not a note. Just his guitar, left on her porch like an apology he couldn't voice. The hours after Aaron disappeared moved like fog. Adelise waited, first with confusion, then concern, then full-blown panic. She called his number more times than she could count, until the sound of voicemail became a sort of punishment. She asked around, his bandmates, his sister, even the owner of the music bar where he sometimes played. No one knew anything, or they claimed not to. "Maybe he just got cold feet," someone said. "He'll come back once he's ready," another offered. But she wasn't worried about a delay. She knew, deep in her chest, what this was. He wasn't late. He was gone. She sat in her wedding dress until the light outside shifted from gold to gray, until the scent of roses in her hair turned sour. until the baby inside her kicked for the first time and she realized she was alone, not just emotionally, fully. "You don't get to disappear," she whispered into the silence. "Not like this, not when I gave you everything." The ache didn't scream. It sat in her bones like weight, and every day after that she carried it, quietly. Through doctor's appointments, she took the bus. Through shifts at the diner, trying not to cry when someone played guitar on the jukebox. Through empty nights, whispering stories to the baby she hadn't even seen yet. Her labor started just before dawn. She was alone in a room that smelled like antiseptic and floor wax, gripping the metal rails of the hospital bed, trying to be brave. A nurse asked if the father was coming. Annalise just shook her head. "All right, sweetheart. You've got us." They meant well, but nothing replaced what wasn't there. Each contraction came like a wave she wasn't ready for. She breathed through it, grit her teeth, blinked away tears, not just from the pain, but from the emptiness. She had imagined this moment differently. Someone holding her hand, someone telling her she was doing great, someone whispering, "We're almost there." Instead, it was machines, instructions, bright lights, and her own voice in her head saying, "Don't break, not now, not here." The moment her baby arrived, there was a hush. Then the sound that shattered her, a cry, tiny, fierce, demanding, a voice that didn't ask for answers, didn't care about missing fathers, didn't know what had been lost, only what had been born. They placed her baby girl on her chest, wrapped in soft pink. Annalise touched her cheek with trembling fingers and whispered, "Hi." The child blinked up at her, unaware of anything but warmth and breath. "I'm sorry you had to come into the world like this," she said, kissing her forehead. "But I swear to you, on everything I've got left, you'll never feel what I felt today. Not while I'm alive." She named her Khalees, not for any meaning she'd found in a book, but for the way the name felt when spoken gently, like something whole, like something soft could still exist, even after everything had cracked open. Have you ever loved someone who disappeared when you needed them most? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. You're not alone. The first weeks with Khalees were a blur of soft cries and sleepless nights. Annalise learned how to hold her daughter with one arm while warming a bottle with the other. She learned which brand of diapers didn't irritate her skin. She learned that babies didn't care if you were sad or tired or pretending to be strong. They just needed you to be there. And so she was, there, every time her daughter opened her eyes. There, every time the world felt too loud or too quiet. There, in the ache of 3 a.m. feedings and the hushed lullabies she made up on the spot. The ache didn't go away. She still reached for her phone sometimes, forgetting there was no one to text. She still caught herself looking toward the door when a guitar played on TV. She still held on to hope, even when she hated herself for it. But over time, something unexpected started to happen. She stopped waiting. Not all at once, not with a grand decision, but with small things. She stopped setting 2 mugs on the counter, stopped checking her inbox for messages that never came, stopped measuring her worth by someone else's absence. Annalise got a part-time job cleaning cabins at a nearby lake. It was quiet work, honest. She strapped Khalees to her chest and hummed while she swept floors, mopped tile, changed linens. She felt invisible, most days. But invisibility had a strange kind of freedom. No one expected her to smile. No one expected her to explain. She was just another young woman doing her best to make it through the day. And that somehow was enough. One morning, Khalees reached out and touched her cheek mid-nap. Tiny fingers, warm, unthinking. Annalise stared at her. This little girl didn't ask about who wasn't there. She didn't care about rings or broken promises. She only knew that the arms holding her had never let go. "Maybe that's enough," Annalise whispered, tucking the blanket around her daughter's legs. "Maybe we can be enough." Time moved. Not quickly, not painlessly, but forward. She took online courses at night, business management, scribbled notes with one hand while rocking Khalees with the other. She saved every spare dollar, sold handmade candles on the weekends, fixed up a second-hand stroller like it was a Rolls Royce. Annalise wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just building something new, day by day, even if no one saw it, even if the world still thought of her as the girl who got left. But that girl was gone now. In her place stood a woman with calloused hands and eyes that had stopped looking back. She didn't know it yet, but life wasn't done with her, not even close, because somewhere across town, A man she'd never met was reading her name on a community board. And something about it made him pause. Morning started before the sun. The alarm didn't scream. It pulsed quietly against her chest. Not out of courtesy, but because she couldn't risk waking Khalees. Every second of sleep her daughter felt like a borrowed gift. Adelise would slide out of bed slowly, feeling the stiff pull in her back, the familiar ache in her knees, and head straight to the kitchenette. She brewed coffee with the last scoop of grounds and let it sit while. She packed formula, a cloth toy, and a banana that had started to spot. They lived in a one-room efficiency above the laundromat. The floor creaked. The ceiling leaked when the wind blew hard enough. But it was theirs. By 5:30 a.m., she was on her way to her first shift, barista at a corner shop where regulars didn't ask questions and tipped a little extra if she remembered how they took their orders. She smiled when she could, kept her head down, pushed through. By 2 p.m., she'd clock out, pick up Khalees from the home daycare, and head to her next job, front desk at a roadside motel just off the highway. There, the stories were louder. Arguments behind closed doors. Guests who came and went with eyes that didn't want to meet hers. But the paycheck cleared every Friday, and the manager let her keep Khalees in the break room during slow nights. Adelise carried exhaustion in her bones, but she never dropped it, because no one was waiting to catch it if she did. Some nights she'd sit on the motel couch, Khalees asleep in her lap, and reread the same online business course module over and over. Her eyes burned, the words blurred, but she kept going. She had to. No one was coming. No one owed her a rescue. And slowly, the grind became a rhythm. There were moments that reminded her it wasn't all wait and worry, like the day Khalees took her first steps, on chipped linoleum with cereal, stuck to her onesie, arms stretched forward, laughing at her own wobble. Or the night they danced in mismatched socks while microwaving leftover soup, the two of them spinning in a room barely big enough to breathe. Or the morning Khalees looked at her and said, completely unprompted, "You're my best." Adelise couldn't respond. She just nodded, throat tight, heart full. It started with a drawing. Crayons spread across the floor, paper curled at the edges, Khalees humming to herself while Adelise folded laundry nearby. The picture was simple, 2 stick figures, both smiling, one with long brown hair, one with yellow. Khalees pointed to the taller one. "That's you," she said, proud. "You're holding me." Adelise smiled. "You did a great job, baby." Then Khalees looked down, crayon in hand, her voice dropping just enough to sound different. "Should I draw my daddy too?" Adelise froze. Her hands kept folding, almost mechanically, but something shifted inside her. A crack she thought had sealed long ago reopened. She knelt down beside her daughter, forcing a steady breath. "Why do you ask?" "Kaya has one. Her daddy picks her up in a red truck. He always brings juice boxes." Adelise nodded, swallowing the lump rising in her throat. "That's nice of him." Khalees stared at her. "Do I have one?" It was the kind of question that didn't come with space for truth. Not yet. Not in the way it lived. So Adelise did what she had done many times before. She reached for what was both kind and true. "You have all the love you need right here. From you." "From me." Khalees paused, thinking. Then she smiled and returned to her drawing, this time adding a big sun above their heads. She didn't press further that day. But the question didn't leave Adelise's mind. It waited. In the quiet spaces. In the way Khalees looked around the room at school events, her gaze lingering when other kids ran to 2 parents. Adelise never spoke poorly of Aaron, not because he didn't deserve the truth, but because Khalees deserved peace. Her world didn't need to start with someone else's absence. She wasn't building her daughter's identity on what was missing. She was building it on what remained. Some nights, though, when Khalees had fallen asleep and the walls felt too close, Adelise allowed herself the smallest indulgence. Memory, not the kind that glorified, the kind that stung. She remembered how it felt to be chosen and then discarded, how silence could speak louder than any goodbye, how love, when abandoned, doesn't always vanish, it sometimes hardens. But even through that pain, there was pride, not bitterness, not regret, pride that she had stayed, not for him, but for the little girl who needed someone to show her what love looked like when it didn't walk away. Adelise's world was built on tight budgets and grocery lists calculated to the last coin. She stretched meals. She reused clothes. She got creative with bedtime stories, But she never cut corners on love. If Khalees wanted to build a castle out of cardboard boxes, she'd find the boxes. If she wanted pancakes shaped like stars, she'd find a way to pour them just right. If she wanted a bedtime song that didn't exist, Adelise would hum until one did. Because even in a life filled with limits, love didn't have to be one of them. The opportunity came on a Tuesday, tucked between spilled juice and a bounced payment reminder. Adelise had been helping coordinate cleanup days at the transitional housing center where she and Khalees had stayed for a time. She showed up early, swept floors, organized supplies, brought extra gloves from the dollar store. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because she remembered what it felt like to walk into a place where no one looked at you like you were broken. She remembered how it felt to be given a clean blanket, a working lock on a door, a place where her child could sleep in peace. So when the program director called her one afternoon and asked if she would be willing to share her story at an upcoming donor event, she hesitated. Not because she was afraid of speaking, but because she didn't think anyone would want to hear it. The director smiled. They don't need a perfect story. They need an honest one. Adelise stood at the podium in a plain black blouse and borrowed flats. Her knees felt like they might give out, but her voice didn't shake. She began simply, no grand introduction. I used to think survival meant staying quiet, shrinking, disappearing into the background so no one could see the damage. She paused, eyes scanning the room, business suits, manicured hands, sparkling water in glass cups. But silence doesn't build futures, it only buries them. She told them about long nights at the motel, about learning to stretch $20 through an entire week, about laughter that came from her daughter at the worst possible moments, and somehow saved her each time. She didn't cry, not because she didn't want to, but because there was something steadier holding her up now. I'm not a victim of abandonment, she said, voice firmer now. I'm a builder of second chances. For myself, for my daughter. For women who've been told they're too broken to try again. The room didn't erupt in applause. It was quieter than that. Still, attentive, changed. Afterward, a man with a trimmed beard and quiet smile approached her. He didn't flatter or gush. He simply said, "You spoke like someone who walked through fire and didn't let it turn her to ash." Adelise thanked him. She didn't expect anything more, but that man would soon change everything. He noticed her before she noticed him. Not in the way that made the air shift or the room hush. Elric Hale didn't pull attention. He didn't have to. He stood near the back of the room, hands clasped, posture straight but not stiff. His eyes followed every word of Adelise's speech like they were underlining it in his mind. When the applause died down, he waited. Let others move first. Let the donors and coordinators shake her hand, offer smiles, offer praise. Only when the noise settled did he step forward. I'm not here to flatter you, he said softly, his tone free of performance. I just wanted to say, what you said mattered. Adelise blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity. Most people led with compliments. He didn't. Thank you, she said, unsure what else to give back. He nodded once, then extended a business card. I run a few community housing projects. We're looking for a site coordinator on the east side. Thought of you. She stared at the card. Because of a speech. Because you've lived what most people can only write funding reports about. She hesitated. Her guard, though polite, was firm. I'm not looking for charity. Good, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting into the faintest smile. I don't offer it. Just opportunities people earn. There was something about the way he spoke, deliberate, quiet, and certain, that disarmed her more than any charm ever had. He didn't push, didn't linger. He just nodded once more and walked away. She didn't call for 2 weeks, but she kept the card, and on a day when the babysitter canceled, her tire blew, and the motel manager yelled over a keycard. Error. She found herself holding it, staring at the name embossed in clean small letters. Elric Hale, Hale Development Group. She called, not because she needed saving, but because she was tired of surviving alone. The interview wasn't formal. He met her at a small park office near one of his community sites. No clipboard, no list of qualifications, just coffee and 2 chairs under a quiet tree. You've already proven you can lead, he said after 15 minutes of conversation. I'm just here to make space for it. Adelise accepted the position, with one condition. I won't owe you. You won't, he said. You'll build something, and we'll both be better for it. The job was more than she expected, and so was he. Elric didn't hover. He didn't micromanage. He gave her the keys to the office, introduced her to the team, then stepped back. But he noticed things, like when she stayed late 3 nights in a row and he began leaving granola bars by the office printer, or when she brought Khalees to work one afternoon. Her babysitter's mom had fallen ill, and he quietly cleared out the small conference room so Khalees could color without interruption. He never asked for credit. He just paid attention. They weren't friends, not at first. They were 2 people who respected the same things: quiet progress, clean ledgers, lives built from sweat, not favors. But gradually, the spaces between them began to shrink. He started joining her on sidewalks, not to oversee, to understand. He asked questions no one else had ever bothered with. What would make this space safer for mothers? How do you want people to feel when they walk into these units for the first time? Adelise found herself answering with more than statistics. She told stories, shared what fear looked like when the lights didn't work, what courage felt like when your child was too young to notice your shaking hands. Elric listened, not just with his ears, with his eyes, with his stillness. One evening, Khalees wandered into his office with a small puzzle box while Adelise reviewed scheduling on the whiteboard. "Mr. C, can you help me?" He glanced up from his tablet and without a word, knelt beside her on the carpet. He fumbled the edges of the cardboard pieces, turning them awkwardly until one clicked. Khalees giggled. "You're really bad at this." "Painfully," he admitted. "But you try." She shrugged, as if that were all that mattered. Adelise stood by the door, frozen, watching her daughter fold effortlessly into someone's space, a space that, for once, didn't feel fragile. Their first dinner wasn't a date. Elric offered to drop by a donation of unused building materials to a women's shelter Adelise had partnered with. She offered to cook afterward, out of gratitude. The meal was simple: pasta, store-bought garlic bread, a salad Khalees refused to eat, but the evening was rich. They laughed when Elric spilled water across the table, and even harder when Khalees made a crown out of the paper napkins and declared herself princess of noodles. It wasn't romantic, not in the usual way, but it felt warm, safe, like maybe, just maybe, her home didn't have to be a fortress anymore. Elric never crossed lines. He didn't rush moments. If he looked at her a second too long, he didn't follow it with a compliment. If their hands brushed, he didn't linger, but he didn't pull away too quickly either. Everything about him was measured, but not distant. He wasn't afraid of getting close. He was just waiting for her to want that too. She didn't know where they were going. Elric had picked up Khalees from school and left a handwritten note on her apartment door. "Take the afternoon off. Pack light. Trust me." She nearly crumpled it in annoyance. She didn't like surprises. But when she called the school and confirmed Khalees had been picked up safely, and when Elric answered, her text with nothing but a smiley face and a pin drop location, something inside her softened. Maybe today could be different. They drove in near silence, music low, windows cracked open. It was late afternoon when the road opened into a stretch of land that hummed with color. Lavender, rows and rows of it, stretching across the hills like a sea of purple breath. Khalees was already running between the rows, laughing, arms wide like she could fly. Adelise stood at the edge of the field, stunned. "You brought me to a flower farm?" Elric chuckled. "No. I brought you to the place I go when the world is too heavy." He handed her a small picnic basket. "It's quieter here." They sat on a folded quilt under the shade of an old sycamore. Khalees napped, head resting on Elric's thigh, arms curled beneath her. Adelise watched them, heart thudding against something she didn't have a name for yet. "She trusts you," she whispered. "I trust her," he replied, gently brushing a piece of hair from Khalees's forehead. Then he turned to Adelise. "And I trust you." Those words didn't come lightly, not after the way she'd built her life, one locked door, one protective boundary at a time. But he wasn't asking her to break down walls. He was asking her to let someone knock. He stood up, reached into the basket, and pulled something from the side pocket. Not a velvet box, just a ring, simple, silver, with a narrow blue stone in the center. He didn't get down on one knee. He knelt, because this wasn't a performance. It was a promise. "I'm not asking for perfect," he said, "or for you to pretend the past never happened." He looked down, exhaled, then back up at her. "I'm asking to be part of what comes next, not to fix you, just to stand beside you. And if you'll let me, to be the kind of father Khalees never has to wonder about." The wind passed through the field. The lavender swayed. Adelise didn't cry. She reached for the ring with both hands and held it in her palm. "I don't know how to be someone who says yes easily," she whispered. "You don't have to." He stood, hands in his pockets. "You just have to mean it when you do." She said yes. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but with the kind of certainty that grows only after everything else has fallen apart. If you believe in second chances or want to, tap subscribe. We tell stories that restore hope, and this one is just getting started. She should have felt joy. That's what this moment was supposed to be. A white stick, 2 lines, a trembling hand. But Adelise just stared at the bathroom sink, the pregnancy test resting beside the faucet, the air too still. She was pregnant. Again, this time, under a roof filled with laughter, with a man who showed up every day. A partner who braided her daughter's hair, even though he still couldn't figure out how to part it straight. A man who walked her home with one hand on her back and the other holding grocery bags. This child was being brought into a life of love, so why did she feel like she couldn't breathe? The truth had been hiding in small corners for months, in the way her body tensed when Elric mentioned the due date, in the ache that came when she watched him fold baby clothes with quiet excitement, in the fear she had long before the second line appeared, because deep in the back of her mind there was a date she couldn't forget. The night Iran came back. It had been nearly a year before Elric proposed. Adelise had been picking up Khalees from preschool when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Del?" She turned, keys halfway into her purse. There he was, Aaron, older, rougher around the edges, but unmistakable. She didn't answer right away. She just stared, as if looking too long would confirm it was real. He began, eyes unsure. "I wanted to say sorry." 2 years of silence, and that's what he led with. She told him she didn't want to hear it, that he had no right to show up, that his absence had rewritten her life in ways he'd never understand. He listened, then he cried. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't manipulative. It was messy. "I was scared," he said. "I thought if I ran, I could come back when I had something better to offer. But by the time I looked up, it felt like it was too late." Adelise didn't know what to say. She didn't invite him inside, but she also didn't slam the door. That night, she sat in silence long after Khalees had gone to bed, her mind swimming with everything he didn't say and everything she hadn't said either. It wasn't about wanting him back. It was about everything unresolved. And maybe that's why, weeks later, after an argument with Elric over something small and stupid and a glass of wine too many, she found herself replaying those memories. She hadn't kissed Aaron, hadn't touched him, but her heart had opened, just for a moment, to a past she thought she'd buried. She and Elric made up the next morning, and then time moved forward. Until today, until this. Adelise didn't tell him right away. She let the weeks stretch on, folding the secret into her day like laundry she kept meaning to finish. At first, she convinced herself it didn't matter. The math was close, close enough to hope, close enough to pray, but not close enough to be sure. She told herself it was fear, but if she was honest, it was shame. Not because she had done something wrong, but because she had let herself feel something she couldn't explain. Because the past, even in memory, had found a way into her future. Elric was gentle with her from the moment she told him about the pregnancy. He bought a tiny green onesie and hung it on the closet door. He cleared out the second bedroom and painted it soft gray with quiet excitement. He read parenting blogs, scribbled down name ideas on napkins, and kissed her belly like it already belonged to someone he loved. And through it all, Adelise smiled. But every time he touched her stomach, a knot pulled tighter in her chest, because there was a part of her that didn't know who this child belonged to, and that made every kind gesture feel like a stolen moment. At night, she would lie in bed long after he'd fallen asleep, watching the ceiling and counting weeks backward, not just once, again and again, as if time would eventually rearrange itself in her favor. She remembered the night she and Elric reconciled. She remembered how his hands had steadied her, the way he always did. She remembered how, just days earlier, she'd stood in a doorway staring at the man who had broken her years ago, and let him speak to a part of her that hadn't healed. There had been no intimacy, no crossing of lines, but there had been a moment where her loyalty had faltered, and now a heartbeat grew inside her, one that didn't come with answers, only questions. She didn't take a test, couldn't bring herself to schedule one, Because even if she had the facts, it wouldn't erase what she had hidden. The truth wasn't just about biology. It was about silence, about letting someone build a dream on a foundation you weren't brave enough to check for cracks. The hospital room was quiet, except for the machines and the sound of Adelise's breath, short, uneven, and panicked. Elric sat beside her, hand resting gently on hers, thumb moving slowly back and forth across her knuckles. His calm was the kind that didn't come from peace. It came from decision. It was nearly time. The nurse had stepped out for a moment. The room felt too bright, too clean, too prepared. Adelise shifted in the bed, sweat already building on her forehead, her heart pounding harder than the contractions. Elric leaned in, voice quiet enough to make her lean closer. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to really hear me." She turned to him slowly, unsure if she could handle what was coming. Then he said it. "Tell me the truth. Is this baby mine?" The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They cracked open the space between them like a plate dropped on tile, fast, final, irreversible. Adelise didn't respond. Her throat closed. Her fingers went still. Her eyes searched his face for anger. There was none, only sorrow, the kind that came from loving someone fully and realizing they hadn't given you the same in return. "I've loved you," he said softly. "All of you. I've loved Khalees like she was mine. I never needed blood to build a family." He paused. "But I can't walk into fatherhood again if I'm still carrying your silence." Her eyes welled with tears. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She wanted to lie, to protect this moment, to protect him. But lies were what built the cracks in the first place. "I don't know," she whispered. "I want it to be yours, but I don't know." Elric didn't flinch. He sat back slowly, absorbing her words like a man who already knew the truth, but needed it said aloud. Seconds passed. Then the nurse returned with a smile and gentle instructions. "It's time." The contractions came like waves. Adelise pushed. She screamed, from pain, from fear, from guilt. And when the baby's first cry filled the room, it sounded louder than anything else in her life ever had. Elric was the first to hold the child. He didn't smile, but he held them close, close enough that it almost looked like love. Then he turned to Adelise. His voice didn't shake. "No matter what, I'll love this baby, but don't let this family be built on secrets again. We both deserve better." The heartbeat monitor ticked like a metronome. Slow, steady, then rising, then dipping again. Outside the window, snow was falling in lazy spirals, soft, slow, too gentle to match the weight pressing down inside the room. Adelise gripped the bed rail, her knuckles pale beneath the pressure. Sweat dampened the edge of her hairline. Her breath came in shallow gasps, the kind she tried to control but couldn't. A nurse moved around her, checking charts, adjusting the IV, offering a smile she barely saw. Elric sat in the chair beside her, hand resting on her leg, calm on the surface. But she could feel the storm underneath. They hadn't spoken much during the ride to the hospital. He held her hand through every red light, helped her breathe, told her everything would be okay. But something in his voice had changed. Not in volume, in weight, like he'd been holding something for too long, and it had started to burn. The nurse stepped out. The room dimmed, as if the walls were bracing for what came next. Adelise looked toward Elric. His face was still, too still. She could tell he was building up to something, that he hadn't followed her into this room just to witness a birth. He was here for more than that. Elric reached forward and touched her hand, gently. "I need to ask you something," he said. His voice cracked slightly. Just once, barely enough to notice. She didn't move. "I need to ask," he repeated, softer now. "Because this is the moment we become parents again, and I can't do that if we're not doing it together." She swallowed hard, lips trembling. "I love you," he said, "but I need to know the truth." He paused. Then the words came, low and heavy. "Is this baby mine?" The monitor beeped. A sharp, steady rhythm. Adelise blinked. Her mouth opened. No sound came. Everything in the room seemed to stretch. The air, the silence, the space between his question and her answer. She wanted to lie, not to deceive, but to protect the man who had chosen them, the home they'd built, the life growing inside her. But lies had weight, and this one was already suffocating her. Elric didn't press her. He just looked at her with eyes that had held so much patience, and were now clouded with something else, not judgment, not suspicion, something quieter, hurt, not from betrayal, from being shut out. "I'm not walking away," he said, "but I need to know what I'm walking into." Adelise's heart pounded. Her vision blurred. The pressure in her abdomen was rising, but the pressure in her chest felt worse. Memories flashed. The knock on her door, Aaron's voice, the tears, the wine, the guilt. Elric's quiet forgiveness for arguments she had started because she didn't know how to feel safe. The way he never asked too many questions. The way he trusted her, more than she trusted herself. She turned away, eyes burning. "I don't know," she whispered. Her voice broke. "I want it to be yours. I want it to be ours, but I don't know." Elric sat still for a moment. Then he stood, not to leave, not to retreat. He walked to the window. Snow continued to fall, slow, unbothered. His shoulders rose with a deep breath, then fell again. He didn't turn back. "I'll love this baby," he said, "no matter what." Then he turned to face her. "But I need you to understand something." He walked slowly back to her bedside. "I don't love based on DNA. You know that." She nodded, barely. "But I can't carry someone else's silence into fatherhood." Another contraction surged. Adelise grabbed the bed rail, her body arching slightly, breath catching. Elric moved closer, pressing the nurse call button. "We're close," he said. "I've got you." His voice didn't change, not even now, because even in this moment, especially in this moment, he still showed up. The nurse rushed in, gloves on, instructions clipped and focused. "It's time." Adelise could barely process the words. Everything hurt, everything blurred, but Elric was still there, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, guiding her breath, never letting go of her hand. And as the pain ripped through her body, she sobbed. Not just from labor, from loss, from fear, from love, and from the unbearable truth that this child might not be his, and that he might stay anyway. The room shifted into motion. The nurse's voice cut through the air with firm direction, and yet everything still felt like it was underwater, muffled, slow, too much. Adelise gripped the side of the bed, her breath ragged, the pain taking over, demanding more than she had left to give. "Almost there," the nurse said. Elric was beside her again, holding her hand, anchoring her to something real. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, even after what she said, even after what she couldn't say. She cried between pushes, not from the contractions alone, but from the weight of everything unspoken. Tears ran down the side of her face, collecting on the pillow. Elric wiped them away without a word, brushing her hair back, his jaw tight. He didn't tell her it was okay. He didn't lie to soothe her. But he stayed. And in the quiet spaces between her sobs, that meant everything. Minutes passed like hours. Her body trembled with exhaustion. Her eyes blurred, lashes heavy with sweat and tears. "I can't," she gasped, barely audible. Elric leaned close, forehead to hers. "You can. You already are." His voice cracked, not with anger, with grief and grace, colliding. "Push," the nurse instructed. "This is it." Adelise screamed. Everything inside her felt like it was tearing, releasing, breaking. And then, the silence before the cry, a single heartbeat of stillness. Then it came, the sound that shattered the tension, the baby's first breath. High, sharp, real, life. The nurse lifted the baby carefully, announcing, "You have a girl." Adelise's head fell back on the pillow. Her chest heaved. Her body shook. She reached out, arms open, but Elric stepped forward first. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. He took the child in his arms like he'd been waiting his whole life to hold her. She was red-faced, squinting, tiny fists balled up tight. He held her close, looked into her face, and whispered something no one else could hear. The nurse wiped the baby gently, swaddled her, then placed her back into his arms. Elric turned toward Adelise. She reached for them both, but he didn't step forward just yet. He looked at her, eyes softer than they'd ever been, but also farther away than they'd ever felt. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "I'll love this child, no matter who she belongs to." Adelise blinked, more tears rushing in. "But I need you to understand something." He paused, holding the newborn close. I can't build a life with someone who won't hand me the truth, not because I need to control it, but because I've spent years learning how to carry love, and I can't carry yours if you keep hiding pieces of it." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice was broken, her heart even more so. The nurse gently took the baby and placed her in the bassinet beside the bed. Elric brushed his hand across the infant's hair once more, then stepped back to the corner of the room. He didn't leave. He just stood there, still, and in that moment, Adelise felt everything she had been afraid of rush in. Not abandonment, something harder, being seen completely, and not being held anyway. She turned her head, looking at the child they had both just brought into the world. A baby wrapped in warmth, resting between a woman who loved too quietly and a man who stayed too silently. If that moment cracked something open in you, share what it brought up. Have you ever faced a truth that nearly cost you everything? Let's talk in the comments. Your story might help someone feel less alone. They stayed in the room that night, but they didn't sleep. Elric sat by the window, his chair turned slightly away. The bassinet rested between them, the baby asleep, soft breaths barely audible, her tiny chest rising and falling, unaware of the distance hanging in the air above her. Adelise lay still, not from exhaustion, though her body ached from every muscle down to her bones, but from something deeper. The silence between them wasn't loud. It didn't carry blame. It didn't ask for answers. It just existed, heavy, real, and unspoken. She watched him in the reflection on the glass. He wasn't angry. He didn't clench his jaw or pace the room or raise his voice. That made it worse. His calmness wasn't comfort. It was heartbreak learned over time, the kind that had learned how to hold itself together even when it wanted to fall apart. The nurse came in with soft footsteps and a clipboard. She checked vitals, smiled gently, offered to bring food. They both nodded, but neither touched the tray when it arrived. The baby stirred, and Adelise instinctively reached out, lifting her gently into her arms. She cradled her close, the way she had with Khalees. The same warmth filled her chest. And the same fear. What if love wasn't enough? What if honesty had come too late? "You can rest," she said quietly, not looking up. Elric's voice answered after a long pause. "I'm not tired." It wasn't cold, just distant. A line had been drawn, not in anger, but in grief. They were discharged the next afternoon. The car ride home was silent, except for the baby's occasional whimper. Khalees met them at the door, bouncing in place, too young to understand anything except excitement at meeting her new sibling. She held her baby sister like she'd found treasure, and Adelise wanted to freeze that moment, for Khalees, for herself, for the family they were trying to be. But Elric's eyes, though kind, were somewhere else. Present, in body, distant in spirit. The days that followed blurred together. He helped with everything. Night feedings, diaper changes, grocery runs. He smiled when Khalees asked questions, kissed her forehead when she climbed into his lap. He did everything a father should do, but he hadn't touched Adelise since the hospital. No hand at the small of her back. No forehead kiss in passing. No, "I love you" before bed. She couldn't even ask for it. Not yet, because deep down, she didn't feel like she deserved it. One night, Khalees was asleep, and the baby had just drifted off after feeding. Adelise stood at the sink, rinsing bottles, staring at the bubbles collecting in the drain. Elric walked in to grab a towel. Their eyes met, the first time all day. She swallowed hard. "Elric." He didn't stop her. He just waited. "I'm not proud of how I handled things. I didn't cheat on you, but I should have told you the whole truth. I let fear speak for me." He didn't interrupt. She continued, voice shaking. "I was scared that if I told you, you'd see me as weak. Or worse, dishonest. I kept saying I wanted peace, but I wasn't being honest enough to earn it." She took a breath. "I know I hurt you. I see it every time you look at me and hold back." Elric nodded slowly. "I wasn't expecting perfection," he said, "but I didn't think I'd have to pull the truth out of the woman I love." His voice wasn't bitter. It was just tired. They stood in silence again. But something about this one felt different. Not final, just unfinished. Adelise didn't step forward. She let him walk out of the kitchen without another word. But this time she didn't retreat into herself. She pulled out a notebook and began to write. Not excuses, no regrets, just the truth. Her truth, What she had carried. Why she had broken. Why she still wanted to heal. With him. The house was quiet in the days after the birth. Not the soft kind of quiet that wraps around you in peace. This was the kind that settled into the cracks. That filled the space between two people who once knew how to reach for each other without thinking. Adelise noticed it in small ways. How Elric kissed Khalees goodnight, but paused before brushing her own shoulder. How he held the newborn gently, but rarely looked at her while doing it. He was present. He cooked dinner, folded laundry, stepped in for diaper duty at 3 a.m. without complaint, but she could feel him somewhere else entirely. And it wasn't because of the baby. It was because of the question, the one she still hadn't fully answered. Not in a way that healed the wound it left behind. She found herself sitting on a scratchy beige couch, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. A small sign on the wall read, "Healing isn't linear. Just honest." The therapist introduced herself softly, asked no questions at first. Adelise didn't speak for the first 15 minutes, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know where to begin. Eventually she whispered, "I don't know how to fix what I broke." The therapist didn't offer solutions, just space and silence that didn't hurt. That was the beginning. At night, after feedings and story time and dishes and sleep that came in pieces, Adelise wrote, not to explain, not to justify, but to let her thoughts breathe. I was afraid to lose something good. I carried pain like it was part of my identity. I thought love would vanish if I told the truth. Some pages ended in smeared ink and tear marks. Some in scribbles she couldn't finish. But each entry peeled back another layer of fear. One evening, Khalees spilled juice across the living room rug. Adelise rushed to clean it up, panic bubbling before she could catch herself. Elric stepped in wordlessly with towels. For a moment, their hands touched. She looked up. His eyes held hers a few seconds longer than they had in weeks. And then, it passed. But something lingered. A warmth that hadn't been there yesterday. Maybe it was a crack in the wall. Maybe not. But it gave her enough courage to write the letter she'd been avoiding. She didn't write it to be sent. She wrote it because the words needed a place to land. You gave me more love than I knew what to do with, and I gave you silence in return. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared so much it scared me. You looked me in the eyes when I was at my weakest and didn't run. You braided Khalees's hair with shaking hands and held my heart in ways no one ever has, but I shut you out, not because of Elric, not because of doubt, but because I hadn't yet learned that truth isn't a threat, it's a foundation. And now, if all you have left for me is silence, I'll respect it. If you walk away, I'll understand. But if you stay, know that I will never ask you to carry a version of me that hides behind fear again. She folded the letter and placed it in her nightstand. Unsent, but not unspoken. Days passed. Adelise woke, fed the baby, packed Khalees's snack, swept crumbs, loaded the dishwasher, answered emails, folded laundry, and kept going. But inside her, a storm was quieting. Not disappearing, but shifting into something clearer. The distance between her and Elric still lived in the spaces where laughter used to slip in easily. But it wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was waiting. He wasn't demanding a conversation. He wasn't pressing for a DNA test. He wasn't retreating into coldness. He was just watching, listening, letting time stretch between them, perhaps hoping she'd come to him with the one thing he hadn't received. Her full, unguarded truth. That night, she stood in the doorway of his office. He was reading, or pretending to. His eyes skimmed the same paragraph twice. Elric. He looked up. He didn't smile. But he didn't flinch either. Do you have a minute? He nodded, closed the book slowly, turned toward her. She walked in without the journal, without the letter, just her. I know silence hurts more than shouting, she began. And I've been silent in all the wrong ways. He didn't move. When Aaron left all those years ago, he didn't just walk out with his promises. He took pieces of me I didn't know how to rebuild. And when he showed up again, even for a moment, I didn't let him back in physically, but I let him linger. I should have told you that sooner. Her voice cracked. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to see me as broken, as messy. I didn't want to ruin this, what we have, what we built. He exhaled slowly, his eyes softening. Not completely, but enough. She stepped closer. I'm not here to beg you to stay. That's your decision, and if you choose to go, I'll never make you feel guilty for it. But I needed you to know the truth wasn't hidden because I didn't love you. It was hidden because I didn't know how to love without fear. Her hands trembled. You once told me I glowed like someone who walked through fire. I did, but the truth is, I never stopped burning. I just got good pretending I wasn't still on fire. She placed her palms flat against her thighs to keep them from shaking. And I'm tired of pretending. She paused. I want to love you in the open. No shame, no silence, no hiding behind maybes. I want you, not out of guilt. But because I've never been more certain of anything in my life, the silence between them stretched again. But this time, it wasn't distant. It was full of things that couldn't be said all at once. Elric stood, walked to her, not fast, not like in movies where everything is wrapped up in a kiss. He stood in front of her, looked into her eyes. You didn't ask me to stay, he said quietly. I told myself I'd only stay if I believed you were still fighting. Not for me, but for yourself. He reached for her hand. I see it now. Her tears came before she could stop them. You're still here? She whispered. He didn't answer with words. He pulled her close. Not urgently, but fully. A breath, a heartbeat, a kind of quiet that didn't hurt. In the hallway, Khalees giggled as she tiptoed toward the nursery. The baby stirred in the crib, and the air in the room changed, not with certainty, not with perfection, but with possibility. Spring came quietly. No grand announcements, just softer mornings, sunlight resting on windowsills, and snow giving way to new things. Adelise planted herbs on the porch. Mint, lavender, basil. She wasn't sure they'd grow right. The soil was stubborn, the planter cracked, but she tried anyway. Some days, Elric would join her with the baby tucked against his chest. He'd bring her warm tea, stand close, not saying much but saying enough with how he stayed. Khalees would skip between them, collecting twigs, asking impossible questions about the sky. Healing didn't come in a moment. It came in small things. On the way, he handed her the baby without flinching. In the way she no longer measured her words like landmines. In the way silence became peaceful again, not because nothing needed to be said, but because they were learning how to say it all in time. One Sunday afternoon, they sat on a picnic blanket behind the house. Khalees was building a tiny fort out of juice boxes and Elric's keys. The baby slept in Adelise's arms, breath soft against her skin. Elric leaned back on his elbows, watching them all. You ever think we'd be here? He asked. She shook her head, brushing a curl from her cheek. Not like this, not with this much quiet. Do you miss the noise? She looked at him. I miss the part of me that thought love had to be earned by suffering. He raised a brow. And now I know real love doesn't make you bleed to prove you're worthy of being held. He reached out and took her free hand. They sat there like that for a long while, the sun warming their shoulders, the baby's breath, anchoring them to the present, Khalees's laughter filling the spaces once reserved for grief. No promises were spoken, no guarantees etched in stone. But at that moment, there was nothing hidden between them. Only the truth, only choice, only love. Have you ever healed from something you thought would break you forever? Type. I'm still standing in the comments. Your story matters here. This space is yours too. The chairs in the school auditorium creaked under nervous parents, fidgeting children, and forgotten backpacks. A line of second graders waited near the podium, shifting from foot to foot. Crayoned art projects taped along the walls fluttered each time the back doors opened. Adelise sat near the middle, holding her breath, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Elric sat beside her, his arm resting across the back of her chair. His button-up shirt had a smear of a toddler's snack on the sleeve, and he hadn't noticed. Khalees stood at the end of the row on stage, a card in her hand, her curls pinned back with tiny butterfly clips. She was taller now, her face thinner, her baby roundness replaced with a quiet grace. But when she looked toward them, scanning the crowd, she still searched for them with the same urgency she had as a child. Adelise raised a hand, gave her a nod. Khalees smiled, a tiny thing, but it meant everything. The teacher called her name. She stepped forward. A microphone too tall for her was adjusted with a quick clank. She unfolded the card. The room hushed. My name is Khalees Hale, she began, voice steady, if small. And today I want to tell you what makes someone a dad. A few heads in the audience tilted. Some parents gave half smiles. But Adelise felt something shift in the air, a quiet tremor. Khalees looked down at her paper. Some people think a dad is someone who shares your last name, or your DNA, or someone who was there from the beginning. She paused. But I think a dad is someone who stays, even when things are hard, especially when they're hard. Her fingers gripped the edges of her card tighter. My dad didn't give me his eyes, or his blood, but he gave me his hands to catch me when I fall, his voice to remind me I matter, and his heart to love me like I was always his. Adelise felt her throat tighten. Khalees looked out at the room again, searching for his face. Elric sat straighter, blinking too quickly. He didn't choose me because he had to. He chose me because he wanted to. She smiled again, just a little. And I think that's the best kind of dad there is. Applause started with one parent, then another, then a wave. Khalees stepped down, cheeks flushed, and walked back to her seat on the riser. Elric rubbed his chest once, trying to breathe. Adelise didn't speak. She didn't have to, because at that moment, a small voice beside them piped up, loud and clear. Duck. Their youngest, now 2 years old, bounced on Adelise's lap, little hands clapping, crumbs still clinging to her chin. Dada clap now. Elric looked at her, eyes wide, surprised. She had never said it that clearly before. He reached for her, pulled her into his arms, pressing kisses into her curly head. Adelise watched as both of their daughters, one by biology, one by choice, leaned into the man who had asked for truth when it was hardest to give, and stayed anyway. She exhaled, a breath she'd been holding for years. Later that night, long after dishes were done and toys cleared from the floor, she sat in bed beside Elric, her journal open on her lap. She didn't write, not tonight. Instead, she looked over at him, asleep, one arm thrown across his chest, the other curled around their youngest, who'd crawled into bed again. Khalees's light snore drifted from the next room, and Adelise whispered her final thought, not to the pages, not to the night, but to herself, and maybe to all the women who would ever listen. Love isn't perfect, but it's patient, and brave enough to begin again, because it's not about never falling apart. It's about choosing, every day, to rebuild, to tell the truth even when your voice shakes, to hold out your hand even when your heart is afraid, to show up, to stay, to love,